Without further ado, then, I want you to help me welcome Chad Whitney for his talk. Intentionality and collective recognition. Take it away, Chad.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Lots of friendly faces in the audience, and I appreciate that. My topic, shared intentionality and collective recognition, is kind of dense, so I'm going to try to make it through the 20 minutes without going over, but that might be a challenge. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the philosophy department and express my gratitude. It's been a real pleasure to work with you guys. I've learned a lot, and not just as far as the content of the classes. So thanks for a great experience, and I'm really glad that I joined the philosophy department. So I'm going to start with this question: what makes a society? And the reason that I'm starting with that question is that the subject of my talk is a piece of an answer to this question. What makes a society? Two concepts are foundational to this specific answer. First one, institutional reality. Institutional reality is the fabric that connects the pieces of society: government, laws, economy, history. Institutional reality, I'm here giving a presentation for a philosophy department. The concept of a philosophy department is a part of institutional reality. To understand institutional reality, you can't exactly just look at society. You have to have sort of a background knowledge of what this building is for, what a library is, language, and understanding of these concepts. They're all sort of woven together. Cooperation. Individuals with a common goal working together with mutual support to achieve goals, to maintain whatever achievements they've made. Cooperation. For cooperation to exist between individuals, participants have to intend to cooperate. They can't just appear to intend to cooperate. The intention to cooperate is the subject of this project. It's a subject. So I'm going to start by defining intentionality. Intentionality, as it says on the slide, is the name given by philosophers to the capacity to be directed at or about content. So for instance, if you're looking at a map, you have the map, and then you have the content of the map. Let's say the map is of Ellis County. Well, the intentionality, the content of the map is Ellis County versus maybe Kansas or the United States of America. A thought contains intentionality. It's about something. It's a thought of something. A belief is a belief of something particular. A thought and a belief have content. The content is the intentionality. I really want to drive that home. A sentence has meaning because of the semantic content. The content, again, is the intentionality. Shared intentionality, that's what creates cooperation. Collective intentionality is present in all cases of shared intentionality. But what is the nature of intentionality? How can it be collective? How can it be shared? These are some of the questions that I would like to answer. Intentionality accompanies most but not all mental states, and I'll describe mental states forthcoming. It's the capacity to hold beliefs, as well as the content of the beliefs themselves. So a mental state. Mental state can be the psychological mode, such as a belief, a hope, a desire, as well as the content of a belief or a hope or a desire. The psychological mode and the content are examples of intentionality. And just to be clear, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to set up a foundation, a base, so that you guys can understand the philosophy, which is coming later. My thesis is intended to evaluate the related arguments of two philosophers who are involved in the dialogue surrounding this topic: John Searle of the University of Berkeley and Michael Bratman of Stanford University. These philosophers have their own views and they argue with each other. There's a dialogue going on. One philosopher, Michael Bratman, believes that shared intentionality is reducible. The other philosopher, John Searle, believes that collective intentionality is not reducible. The goal of my project is to demonstrate and argue persuasively for this position. Michael Bratman's reductive analysis of shared intention is, in fact, compatible with John Searle's non-reductive view of collective intentionality. And I think you guys will hopefully understand more about this soon. So this is John Searle in action. Let's start with collective intentionality, and for those of you who know me, I just had to include at least a picture of a snake. It is relevant, I think. So mental states that are common among people, that's an example of collective intentionality. But collective intentionality is kind of a complex subject. It's not just black and white, it's not just cut and dry. There are types of collective intentionality, and I'll explain those. The content of these psychological modes, which remember are beliefs, hopes, desires, when they're common among a group of individuals, you have collective intentionality in the most basic form. So for instance, right now, we're all involved in my presentation. We all have beliefs and desires, and if some of those beliefs and desires are common among some of us, then that's an example of collective intentionality. It's collective, and the content of the belief is common among us, therefore it's collective intentionality. Example, a common loyalty to the Bill of Rights or to the Constitution, and for the rattlesnake, a common fear of rattlesnakes. So if you're in a group of people who is terrified of rattlesnakes, understandably so, then there's a collective intentionality, there's a collective content to the fear. So I'm going to get into the different variations of collective intentionality, which are at this point poorly understood. Collective intentionality in the non-cooperative form, distinguished by the causal role of the group intention in determining the actions of the individual. What does that mean? Well, if you were to group everybody together who's afraid of snakes and say, go stand in that corner. Well, there's no causal relationship between the group being people who fear snakes and the individuals who actually fear snakes. It's just a coincidental, accidental combination of individuals. A collective intention can be present among people who are not cooperating, but who possess a specific intention that's common to others. For instance, as I said, loyalty to the Bill of Rights. People who intend to improve the environment, for instance, by recycling, you can group them together as people who intend to improve the environment, but they're not recycling together. They're not cooperating in any way. They're just people with a common interest. And in contrast to that, people who are participating in a symphony are all working in concert together. So cooperative collective intentionality. Take a look at the picture. Football players on a team, they're working cooperatively, without a doubt. Each one has a role that is relational to the goal of the team. That's a linebacker has a role that is established and issued by the goal of the team, which might be to win the game, or the goal of the defense, which might be to prevent scoring by the offense. So this is the important one, collective recognition. Collective recognition is what determines institutional reality. Laws, currency, rules, things like that. Collective recognition assigns functions. These functions are not understood by their physical properties, but they exist nonetheless. So you might ask, well, what's an example? A $20 bill is an example. A $20 bill is just a piece of paper, and yet I can use it to exchange for goods and services. If I were to go and try to pay for my groceries with a pile of sand, it just wouldn't work. Why? Because there's no collective recognition of sand as currency. Status functions, institutional facts, these are all the result of collective recognition. Now, just as an aside, collective recognition doesn't necessarily mean collective acceptance. Whether or not you accept the fact that you have to have a driver's license, you have to have one to function in society. Whether or not you accept that a $20 bill is currency, you have to use it in order to pay for your groceries. So what is a status function? Well, a status function results from collective recognition, and it's an assigned function that we all agree upon. So if you take a look at a driver's license, and let's say you're an alien, and you think, well, what is this little thing that I have in my hand? You couldn't just look at it and understand from the physical facts alone that it is a driver's license. You wouldn't understand that it has a specific function. You wouldn't understand the background information that creates that function or the relationship of the driver's license to the laws. You would look at it and you might be able to ascertain, certain things about it, but all physical facts. And yet it is nonetheless factual that it is a driver's license and it has a specific function. My example, a dollar bill, just a piece of paper. But it functions as currency because we all collectively recognize it as currency. So now I'm going to talk about John Searle's specific philosophy. He talks about the types of collective intentionality, but specifically cooperative collective intentionality, as irreducible. Well, what does that mean? I'll try to use a few examples. So case one, a group of people who recycle can be reduced to individuals recycling. The recycling is caused by their individual intentions to recycle. If I say I'll recycle and you'll recycle, therefore we will recycle, then indeed we're recycling, but we're not recycling cooperatively. Now, case two is an example of cooperative collective intentionality. An individual's role within a symphony is caused and determined by the needs of the symphony. So earlier when I talked about a group of people who are afraid of snakes standing in the corner, I said that there's nothing about the group itself that causes or determines the roles or the identities or the functions of the people within the group. It's just a coincidental grouping of people with something in common. But a symphony is not the same. A football team, it's not the same. Because the group mentality, the group goal, the group interests all determine in a causal way the function and the roles of the individuals within the group. So as a symphony, if you're playing an instrument within a symphony, you play in accordance and as a part of the symphony itself, as a part of the group involved. So example, we'll be part of a symphony, therefore you'll play your role and I'll play mine. Notice that the sentence starts with a we. The difference is that collective intention to cooperate is present in case two, and it is marked by the initial we, which establishes and causes the individual roles, which are indicated by the corresponding I and you, meaning that we start with this idea of, let's say, a football team, and we have a play that we want to run. So the quarterback understands his role as a part of the play, the running back understands his role as a part of the play. All of the roles are established causally by the desires and the goals of the team to run the play. In the group of recyclers in case one, it starts with an initial I, which results in just an accidental we. Again, it's just a coincidental grouping. So a plural subject. Now, remember, we have the non-cooperative elements of collective intentionality where there's just a common belief, a common fear, and then we have the cooperative element. So in case two, there's an indivisible we that plays a causal role in determining the actions of the individuals participating. So again, when I say we will run a passing play on a football team, the we that I use to make that statement is referred to as a plural subject. And it's irreducible in the sense that if you were to divide that we into only individuals, similarly to a coincidental grouping or a non-cooperative form of collective intentionality, then you would lose the importance of the function of that plural subject in determining the roles of the individuals in the activity. The indivisible we intention is a plural subject. It is a mental state, and it can be understood by statements made in the first person plural. Example, we must win this baseball game. If I were to say I must win this baseball game by reducing the we in that statement to an I, it would make no sense because an individual can't win a game. That is a team effort. So more on the plural subject. One can have a plural subject in their mind that's actually mistaken. The example that I use here, if we're pushing a car together and I've run out of gas, which has happened many times, we're pushing a car, and let's say that I'm the only one pushing. You're actually just leaning and relaxing. Well, I can still think that you're pushing. I can still have a plural subject in my mind. I can still say we are cooperating to push this car so I can get some gas. Whether or not you're actually pushing is irrelevant. This is an important point to remember because this shows the irreducibility of the actual plural subject and the fact that it can take place as a mental state in an individual's mind. So if I were to think we are pushing this car, or I'm pushing this car as a part of our pushing this car, cooperatively, and I were to think, well, I'm pushing this car plus you're pushing this car, it wouldn't quite make as much sense cooperatively because that second version can be reduced to just individual intentionality. But for us to push the car together cooperatively requires the plural subject. And for the philosophers, what I'm saying is that the plural subject satisfies the requirements for Cartesian individualism. John Searle says collective recognition is reducible. So remember, there are several forms of collective intentionality. One of them is collective recognition, and it is cooperatively neutral. Another one is cooperative, and it involves the plural subject. And then another one is non-cooperative, and it is just coincidental. But collective recognition is reducible, and John Searle says that himself. This is a very important point, because the status function of objects like dollar bills, wedding rings, that function is caused by individuals collectively recognizing it as such. If you were to say, well, I'm going to just establish this new status function, like perhaps this little stick that I have in my hand here is currency. Well, unless everybody else joined you in recognizing it as currency, it wouldn't be currency. People might look at you kind of crazy. Cooperation is caused by the plural subject. So the cooperative version of collective intentionality, again, there's a causal relationship between the plural subject that bears upon the collective and determines the roles. This is not a case of that. Collective recognition is reducible to I intentionality instead of we intentionality. Cooperation is caused by a collective intention to cooperate. A status function, on the other hand, is caused by collective recognition of the function. So we don't necessarily cooperate in determining that a $20 bill is currency. We just have to abide by it. We have to recognize it. So now I'm going to get into this guy, Michael Bratman. He's the other philosopher. And he talks about this concept of shared intentionality, which, remember, according to him and according to Searle, these two concepts of shared intentionality and collective intentionality are different in the sense that collective intentionality is apparently irreducible and shared intentionality is reducible. Shared intentionality is collective intentionality that is actually shared among two people, and it is reducible to individual intentions. So, a shared intention is present if the conditions of mutual agreement are satisfied. We must intend to participate in a joint activity with mutual agreement. So again, going back to cooperation, cooperation is a form of shared intention because we must know that we're cooperating. We have to know that the other people are cooperating as well. And together, cooperatively, we work together to pursue an end, to pursue a goal. Mutual agreement. For conditions of mutual agreement to be satisfied or present, we have to intend to cooperate because we know the other participants intend to cooperate. Which, remember, that's slightly different than the form of collective intentionality in which I can be mistaken about you pushing the car. In this sense, I have to know that you're pushing the car. It must actually be shared between the two of us. So there are defective cases of shared intention, where the illusion of shared intentionality can result in the appearance of cooperation, but when there's no cooperation at all. And to describe this, I'll refer to an example from my own experience. I've been going out and walking, trying to get in better shape, and I put on my headphones and I go out and I hit the trail up on the levee, and I walk alone. I'm not walking with anybody. I don't like to walk with anybody. I just want to go out and enjoy some music and get a little exercise. Well, one night when I was out there, I'm walking along and I just feel a creepy vibe. And I look over and there's a shadow just closing in on me, and it's some other person. And this guy's walking next to me, and all of a sudden he just kind of stops and matches my stride. He's right beside me. I'm feeling very awkward, creeped out. We're not walking together, but it certainly appears that we are. So the awkward feeling that I had came from the fact that we were both individuals doing the same thing, but we weren't doing the same thing together. Okay, so this looks kind of confusing, but it's very important. This is the notation for the conditions for a shared cooperative activity related to a shared intention. So if we have a genuine shared cooperative activity, let's say that we are working together on a team, and we all have our established roles assigned in accordance with the goal of the team. If we have a case of that, and we want to analyze it working backwards, we start with the shared cooperative activity and we ask, well, what has to be necessary for this to take place? This is what has to be necessary. And I won't try to explain it too much, but these are the conditions for shared cooperative activity. These are the conditions for shared intention. So shared intention and collective intention, let's compare these things. The goal of this project was to show the compatibility of Searle's view of collective intentionality with Bratman's view of shared intentionality. But how are they compatible? Searle's view of collective intentionality has several forms. One of them is definitely compatible with the subject of Bratman's work, the shared intention. Collective recognition requires a set of mutual conditions. Going back to that. Oops. That would be this slide. So these are the conditions that Bratman has laid out for a shared intention to be present. And anytime a shared intention is present and turns into a shared cooperative activity, these will always be there. These are the conditions for mutual support. So John Searle talks about collective recognition and how it is reducible. Well, the reason it's reducible is because it requires those same exact conditions that Michael Bratman pointed out, conditions for a joint activity. A status function, like a driver's license for Andrew's sample here, a status function requires conditions of mutual support. We all have to collectively recognize a driver's license as a driver's license. Bratman's conditions for a shared cooperative activity and his concept of shared intention serve a purpose in Searle's understanding of collective recognition. And Searle's only really talked about collective recognition in his later work, so I think it's still developing. But there's a gap that can be filled by Bratman's conditions for a shared cooperative activity. Both Searle's view of collective intentionality and Bratman's view of shared intention are compatible, and they're even mutually beneficial, meaning that Searle's understanding of collective recognition has a gap in it. And Bratman's conditions for mutual support can fill that gap and play a great function. Searle's analysis covers at least two forms of collective intentionality. Collective recognition that is reducible to I intentionality plus mutual belief, so individuals plus mutual support, mutual cooperation. And then two, the plural subject that's required for we intentionality, and that is irreducible. So again, a symphony, a football team, situations in which there's a cooperative group element that determines the roles and causes the functions of the individuals involved. Bratman provides analysis for one of these forms of collective intentionality, which is the shared intention, aka collective recognition. So again, what makes a society? Collective recognition makes a society. Collective recognition of it as a society, collective recognition of laws, government, functions within society that do real work and certainly exist and are factual, and yet are only the result of consensus. Collective recognition results in status functions such as laws, currency, government, and it results from shared intentionality requisite to cooperation. Bratman's conditions of mutual agreement precede status function. So to sum it all up, Searle asks, well, what is collective recognition? Is it cooperatively neutral? Is it reducible? He says, yeah, it is reducible. But what does it mean? Well, collective recognition results from collective agreement, although not necessarily agreement to something, just agreement to recognize a law, currency. And collective recognition results in society. Collective recognition is the result of individuals not necessarily voting to agree on it, but individuals collectively recognizing certain features of society. Bratman's conditions of mutual agreement precede status function. And again, status function is a very important part of Searle's philosophy, and it results from mutual agreement. So that's it. Any questions? This one?
Yeah, left.
This is a gray banded king snake, and it took me a long time to find it.
Hey, is there anything that these guys disagree about that you know about? I mean, is there anything that Bratman is saying contradict anything that Searle says?
Well, Bratman at first says, no, I'm not talking about what Searle talks about as the plural subject. But then in a later paper, he says, well, maybe the plural subject is reducible. And that's where he leaves it. Searle, on the other hand, actually says unequivocally that Bratman is wrong and that shared intention is, in fact, reducible.
Do you think it's reducible?
Yeah, shared intention is reducible.
No. The we predicate.
Plural subject.
Plural subject.
Well, I do think it's reducible.
So for instance, when someone says, we believe such and such, and they look around, right? What they mean is, if I may speak for us all, you give me 5 seconds to object, right? So the idea is that I believe it, you believe it, right? Right? This kind of a thing. It's almost like a political action.
Right.
I think, to say something like this. And sometimes, in other cases, it probably means, well, surely most of us believe this, right? Or in another context, right? So, is that what the reducibility question comes to? I mean, can you take this we thing and translate it as, well, I believe it, and you believe it, and you too, right? Yes? Nodding of the head, right? Okay, yeah. We.
That's a case of collective intentionality, but there's no cooperation involved in it. Nothing about saying that we all happen to believe something is cooperative. To cooperate, we have to work together.
Okay, but the same thing, like, we're pushing this truck, right? Right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the same thing, right?
Well, Searle would say that that example is irreducible. Because when you talk about a cooperative we, and you think, before you even ask anybody, you have to think, okay, I'm going to ask, are we pushing this truck? Well, the we in that statement, according to Searle, is irreducible. My personal opinion is that it is reducible.
And it reduces to, I'm pushing
and you're pushing plus we're pushing together,
so
plus we know that we're pushing together.
Where's Searle getting this? I mean, surely he understands this is a simple point.
Well, Searle is focused on creating a philosophy of society. He's working from sort of a high point of view to a more detailed, lower point of view. And collective intentionality plays a specific role in his philosophy of society. So when he talks about we intention, it's not some complicated idea. It's just simply a plural subject in the sentence that you use to describe what you're doing. We are cooperating. Well, in order to make that statement, the we that you're talking about, when you use it, plays a certain role in the statement. We are cooperating. Well, if you were to say I am cooperating and you're cooperating, well, the word cooperating already packs in the we into it. And he believes that that's irreducible. Yes?
I have a couple of questions, but I'll follow this up. I mean, so on the one hand, we have Searle's claim that you can't reduce these things. And on the other hand, we have Margaret Thatcher's claim that society does not exist. It's all reducible to individuals. Right. You didn't talk a lot about what reducibility means here, but basically it's the idea, as you know, that to reduce one thing to something else means you could say everything at the upper level thing in terms of the lower level. Nothing is left out.
Exactly.
And so presumably Searle believes that by trying to reduce this, we leave something out.
Yes.
What are we leaving out? So you said cooperation can't be reduced because I can't say I cooperate and you cooperate because I can't, that doesn't make any sense. I cooperate implies. But I could say something like, I do this with the understanding that you do it too. Why couldn't I just reduce this in other language without using the word cooperate?
Well, because
leaving out by doing that.
There's a concept that I left out of the presentation because I had to meet the requirements for 20 minutes, but it's the concept of collective causation. So if I say that we are going to vote in an election, and then we vote in an election, well, you can reduce that to me voting and you voting, and then we voted. There's no causal relationship between the we that turns around and establishes a role for me or you. But if you say that folks, we are going to play a football game this Sunday. This is my team, there's the other team, this is the offense, this is the defense. The we involved in a team, for instance, is fundamentally irreducible in the sense that if you take away the we aspect, you take away the function of the individuals in relation to the we. So if you say the team is going to play in the Super Bowl and we're going to run this button hook pattern, well, that play determines causally the role of the individuals within the play. And that's why it's irreducible. Because if you were to reduce the we involved in that team element, involved in the function of the team, then you remove the collective causation of the team itself in determining the roles of the individuals. Is that understandable?
I agree with that. I understand what you're saying.
Fair enough. Dr. Trimble?
I'm still trying to get clear about it. So suppose I'm thinking about a case where we're a football team and each of us wants to win, we're trying to win, but it's not true really that we are trying to win because Dr. Torstensen is taking money to throw the game. He's going to fumble at a crucial moment. and that kind of thing. So in that kind of case, then we don't have the we causation, but what we'd have if we were trying to win, truly we were trying to win, would be the same as what I and you and the rest of us, all except for Dr. Tostenson, have.
Yeah.
And so it seems like it would clearly be reducible to that, just that plus the statement that, I mean, what we have, what I have and you have.
Excluding Dr. Tostenson.
Excluding him, but if we were really trying to win, then each player would have what we have, and none would have what he has. So it would be reducible to just, I have that, you have that, and so on, just that addition, wouldn't it?
Well, let's say that you were a running back and I'm the quarterback, and I would never be the quarterback. But so I have my job, which is to snap the ball or to receive the snap, and let's say to hand it off to you, the running back. And you have your job as well.
Sure.
Both of those jobs are determined by the team goal, which is to win the game, but also the goal of the offense, which is to run a play successfully. So regardless of whether or not you have your individual intentions and I have my individual intentions, there's a greater intention involved that's completely determined by the plural subject, by the we, saying we are going to run this play. Does that help?
Maybe. I'm not, yeah.
Do you want to clarify on your question a little more?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Sticking with the football theme, can you not reduce that to individual intentionality based on an emotion or how you feel with a victory? Regardless of how the other individuals feel, you get a personal high from it. You enjoy a win.
Well, I mean, that certainly could be a form of collective intentionality, but you have to ask, is it cooperative? For you to feel that way, is there some element of cooperation? And my answer is no. It doesn't seem, there's elements of cooperation in creating that feeling if you feel joy because you just won, for instance. But is there an element in cooperation in the actual feeling? It doesn't seem like there is.
Is it not reducible if there's synergy?
What is
You know
that?
what I'm saying? Like where the group together is more than the individual sums put together. You see what I'm saying? So some things in a group, maybe when they're split apart, it balances out. Everything's there. But some things the groups does create something bigger than the individual.
Well, if it does create something bigger, then I would say that it must bear a causation between whatever it is that's bigger and the individuals that make up the group. And if it does, then Searle would say that that's irreducible, that that's a plural subject. Whether or not you guys agree, I don't know that I agree entirely, but that's what he would say. Yes.
I know very well your passion for biology and snakes in particular. Do these two theories that you speak of carry over into other groups of organisms?
Are you asking if there's collective intentionality or shared intention in non-humans?
Yep.
I think so.
Can you
I
give
think
some
so.
examples?
Well, bonobos and chimps, they participate in coalitions. Franz de Waal said that they actually participate in war. Higher order mammals and primates, dolphins, maybe even some birds like macaws or crows, maybe octopus. Anything that has a gregarious nature, I would think, off the top of my head, has a potential for collective intentionality. And I certainly would never say that humans are the only species that have collective intentionality. And that's the best answer that I have anecdotally. I don't know for sure.
Wouldn't that go down to the individual's desire for survival?
Perhaps. But if there's cooperation, then Searle would say that there's an irreducible plural subject. So, and whether or not that is irreducible, I really couldn't tell you. My opinion is that it is reducible.
The point about synergy is usually one of the ways it's understood is in terms of emergence, right? If something emerges and comes into existence that's more than the sum of its parts. And there's a real issue whether there's any such thing as that, whether there's anything that actually emerges. But I think everybody agrees that if there's emergence, then that would be irreducible, that it's something new in addition. So I want to get to this metaphysical question. One of the reasons people are interested in reducibility is the question of what exists, right? We want an inventory of reality, and we want to know what's real. Well, are individuals real? Well, let's suppose they are. do you somehow get something new in existence when you talk about a team? I mean, in a cooperative team, is that a metaphysically real thing? If it's not reducible, it would presumably be, right? It's a new, real thing. So when you join a football team, you now have a new thing in reality that's in addition to the players. You have the 11 players on the offense, and you have the offense. So you have 12 things. Is that the view? That, I mean, because that's one of the reasons people resist reduction, because that seems weird.
I think that's compatible with Searle's view. He would have to say that an emergent property is irreducible. I think people would agree that if they exist, it is irreducible. But let's talk about the philosophy department. If I were to say the philosophy department hired a new instructor, well, that's not you hiring a new instructor. It's not Dr. Drabkin hiring a new instructor. It's the philosophy department. Let's say that you won the lottery and retired. Well, and somebody came to replace you. Nonetheless, the philosophy department would still be the agent hiring the new instructor. And to reduce the category, the philosophy department, to just the individuals within it is to lose what is captured by the phrase the philosophy department.
You know, is what you're losing something practical? I mean, practically speaking, it's a useful term because they captured a lot of stuff.
It's a part of institutional reality.
Is it a real thing?
It is real. It is real. It plays a function. And it plays a part in determining other things. So it is real. If you have a Civil War cannonball and you ask the physicist, could you analyze this? And they analyze the properties and they find out the chemical, molecular makeup and that it's rusted and all this. They might be able to carbon date it. They can report facts about it from the physical object itself. Then you ask the historian, and the historian might report that it came from this battle or from this exact location. And those facts that the historian reports are just as real as the facts the physicist reports, and yet you can't derive them just from the physical state of the cannonball. And so those facts are analogous to institutional facts, again, the driver's license, properties that you can't derive from the actual physical object itself. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the claim that those historical facts are just as real as the physical facts is a very controversial claim.
Yeah.
Many reductionists would say that's not true. That they're just sort of made up truths.
Well, John Searle would disagree.
Right. Yeah.
And who's to say that they're not real just because you can't get them from the physical facts of the object?
Well, I mean, if you're a physicalist, you would say the only things that exist are the material particles, and the other stuff is just words.
Well, it sounds like they made up their mind anyway. So the physicalists.
Well, even the carbon dating could be considered not real. I mean, yeah, there's science, and within this far of the graph, it does make sense. But we're making accusations about something so far back in the path that we can't guarantee that there's not a dip in there somewhere. I mean,
Yes.
Can we return to the topic of the plural subject? There's
Yes. Next question.
A sentence from your paper that I was hoping you'd comment on. It should be noted, you write, that a plural subject is part of an intentional state, like a belief or desire, and as such, it satisfies the most rigid requirements of Cartesian individualism. That phrase, Cartesian individualism, I'm curious about. In your footnote, you say, okay, so Cartesian individualism refers to the skeptical claim made by René Descartes. Cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. Now, therefore I am thing, the idea is that anyone who can bring this thought to their attention realizes they exist, right? But by the very fact that it's before your attention. Now, I think we're pushing this truck or something like this, right? Now, you suggest that I could be a brain in the vat doing this or something like this, right? Well, we're pushing this truck, right? Okay. Therefore, we exist. What's the strictest, most rigid requirements of Cartesian? I don't get what that's about.
It's a matter of skepticism.
Right.
If some philosophy student said, well, now hold on a second, you could be in the Matrix, or you could be deceived by an evil genius, and maybe you're the only one that exists and all of you guys are illusions. Well, in spite of that being true, I can still have a plural subject as the as a part of my interior monologue, as a part of a sentence that I might use to describe what we're doing. It doesn't even have to be Cartesian skepticism or individualism. It could simply be the fact that I think you're pushing the car, but you're really not. You don't have to actually be pushing the car for my intention to be a plural subject.
But, I don't know what the most rigid requirements of Cartesian individualism is, but I always assume that one of the requirements is that to even contemplate anything, you know you exist. I mean, that's what makes you an individual. The we thing doesn't work that way, does it?
Well, no, it doesn't have to work that way. If it's a shared intention, it does have to work that way because it's actually
Well,
shared.
it work, yeah.
But in cases like the plural subject, whether or not you exist is irrelevant to the fact that in my head, I still think that we're pushing a car together and cooperating. As long as in my head, I think that we're cooperating, there's a plural subject. It's very simple. And as far as Cartesian individualism goes, that's my way of saying you can be as skeptical as you want. And you can say that the other guy pushing the car doesn't even exist. The car may not exist either. And yet, nonetheless, in all of your rigid skepticism, you cannot prove, you cannot even demonstrate that the plural subject in my head is reducible to just us, to the I's. So.
If plural subjects, or whatever term Searle would use for the new entity that exists when we have shared collective intention, can that be held morally responsible, independent of the people who are cooperating?
I think so.
Okay. Can you give an example where it might be morally justifiable to hold a collective, a we, responsible for something, independent of the individuals who...
Sure. Well, let's say that you work at a prison and you were told to abuse a prisoner and you decide to do that. Well, you're responsible and the people who told you to do that are responsible. Let's say the philosophy department agrees and nobody objects to do something terrible or to, spray graffiti all over Rarick Hall. The philosophy department, meaning those people who agreed to do that, the philosophy department is responsible for that. Now, when it comes to moral responsibility, I haven't examined that very much, but it does seem like perhaps that's a result of collective recognition, which would mean that there isn't necessarily a plural subject. And in that case, maybe if Dr. Miller stayed at home that night, whether he agreed or disagreed to graffiti Rarick Hall, he wouldn't be responsible for that. So there's certainly something there.
In status functions, you had said that we do not have to agree.
Right.
Right. We're
You just
sort of
have to
caught
recognize.
up in this system
Right.
that's sort of beyond our control.
Yeah.
So I wondered then morally, how would you draw that line?
Well, remember, status function is a result of collective recognition, and collective recognition is reducible.
Right, but you were just saying that some forms might not, or some
Yeah, I think
might
that's
hold
possible.
morally responsible for things that are not.
Well, that's getting into other dimensions. I mean, if I were just to say the basic superficial statement, we just spray painted Rarick. Well, in that actual sentence, there's a plural subject. My thought is that perhaps that plural subject is reducible, but then again, I also think that all plural subjects are reducible. I don't know that I really agree with Searle.
Like at the corporate level, suppose we all got fired and they hired all new professors of philosophy. Could you still find them, find the department to fix the building?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. And again, that could be related to the fact that it's collective recognition. And so that is reducible to individuals. But I think that's a good question, and who knows where this subject will lead. It's not a terribly old subject, so at least in this language.
I mean, this also gets back to the question of collective guilt. Like the United States, are we responsible as a country for things that the United States did 100 years ago? If that's irreducible, then presumably we still are collectively guilty, and it goes back to that question.
Well, when people make that statement, I just assume that they're talking about some practical or tangible effect that's still in play, like the fact that if there's an institutional advantage to one group over another, that's still advantageous today.
So in the car pushing example, are you claiming, and again, I'm not always sure whether it's you or Searle talking, Are you claiming that they cooperatively are irreducible when they're pushing the car? Is that the claim?
It's not that they are irreducible, or, if we're pushing a car, of course you can say 2 individuals or 3 individuals are pushing a car. What's irreducible is the cooperative element that establishes our roles. So if I say I'm going to push the right side, you're going to push the left side and steer, our roles are established by the joint activity, by the cooperative element, by the plural subject.
It seems like that the role can be understood in terms of the individuals. Like, I recognize this as my role, or I recognize that I'm doing this, and I recognize that you're doing that. It's not clear to me that there's anything really left out if you do that, if you reduce it in that way.
Well, maybe you would agree with Bratman.
I mean, it's sort of like thinking, suppose I'm pushing the car and you're pushing it, but I'm not aware that you're doing it, and you're not aware that I'm doing it. We're not cooperating. But causally we explain pushing the car in terms of our individual actions. But now let's suppose we agree to do it together. We're still doing the same thing. We still causally explain the car's motion in terms of your actions and my actions. Now we call it cooperation. It's not clear to me that there's anything really different ontologically.
There is a difference.
About one or the other.
There is a difference. The difference is the intention to cooperate. In the first example, there's no intention to cooperate. So the intention itself doesn't bear a causal role in the scheme or the story of what's going on. If you wanted to explain, like a Laurel and Hardy example where they're painting 2 sides of a house and they never see each other, well, you could explain that without ever referring to a plural subject. But then if they get together and say, well, we're gonna go ahead and paint this house cooperatively. You do this part, I'll do this part. If you're running behind, I'll come help you if I'm finished early. Once you get to that point, you're using a lot of we's in there. And those we's, if they establish a causal role for you and for me, which they do because they're cooperative, those we's, according to Searle, are plural subjects and they're irreducible. So there is a difference. The difference is the intention to cooperate. And remember, the subject is shared and collective intention.
Can be reduced, and it seems to me it can. Even the intention, I think, can be reduced down to individual perspective.
Well, what would the intention be? Is the intention in your head that we are going to cooperate, therefore I'm going to do this? Is that what the intention is?
If you think about cooperation, what does it mean? It means that I'm going to do my part, and you're going to do your part. I mean, that's sort of what cooperation is.
Part of what?
Is that the goal is we're going to move the car.
Right, the goal is the irreducible plural subject. That's the cooperative element.
No, the goal is the car movement. The goal is not our cooperation. The goal is the car, and the means are you push your side, I'll push mine.
Well, if I have the goal to push the car, that's not the same as if we have the goal to push the car. So the goal is different in both of those cases. And the difference between the goals is that one is a result of collective intentionality and the other is not. So
to me, the goals are different. It seems to me the goal is in both cases to get the car to this point. And the means.
Well, yeah, but if the goal in a superficial sense might be to move the car, but your goal to move the car is going to be different than my goal to move the car as individual. Let me backtrack. If we have a collective intention to move the car, my goal is going to be different than your goal. My goal is going to be to push the left side rear of the car. Your goal is going to be to push the left side front of the car or something and steer. Our collective goal is to move the car. That's a different goal than to just move the car individually. Because to move the car individually, my individual goal, if you write down what is your goal, my goal is to move the car individually. If you write down what is your goal together, the cooperative moving the car, the goal is that we will move the car. My personal goal is to push this side. Your personal goal is to push that side. So there's a difference in the goals. We have individual roles. We have individual goals that are determined causally by the collective goal in the case of cooperation.
I think the extra goal might be the group affiliation, because your goal is going to be to move the car. The other guy's goal is more or less going to be to help you.
Right.
Because he doesn't really care if the car gets moved unless he's riding with you. Right?
Right.
So then it creates this connection between two people. I think that might be the third part that can't be reduced.
If a football team is running a play, there might be this higher order goal that is to win the game, or maybe even to win the Super Bowl, or maybe even have a very brilliant career as a football player. There are all sorts of goals involved. But when you have an individual goal that is causally related to or determined by a group goal, then that's a case of a plural subject and cooperation. So,
I was just thinking one way to get a handle on this would be if we could think of actions that could not be described in non-cooperative terms.
Yeah.
And the car example is maybe not the best, because clearly,
It's cooperatively neutral.
yeah, but if there are actions that there's just no way to describe what's going on, unless you have a we in there.
Playing chess, maybe.
Yeah, or having a conversation.
Right.
I mean,
Collecting program.
And currency is the same way. Remember, if I were to decide to use something as currency that isn't currency, it wouldn't work out. So we collectively recognize currency as such. Playing chess, you can't play chess with yourself. You might be able to play with a computer, but there are necessarily, fundamentally, and primitively two roles in a chess game. So, Josh?
Yeah, like it's just kind of a follow-up on what Dr. Miller and Mr. Faust had said. But the discrepancy I see between a plural subject and shared intentionality is that third factor that there's cooperation that makes their individual roles dependent upon each other. Like you said with fear of snakes or voting, I can go vote or be afraid of snakes, take myself away from the group. That makes complete sense that I'm doing it. That's reducible. But in the instance of pushing a car or playing on a football team, my role is, while it is part of a larger goal, like my role or intentions as a running back are, or as a wide receiver, we'll say, are similar or the exact same as the goal of the team. My specific role is dependent upon their roles.
It's caused by.
Yeah, it's caused and it's dependent upon it. So I think it's correct in saying that a football team is irreducible, because if you did try and reduce it, the role would change substantially.
Right.
Because like a quarterback making a brief hang signal could mean change of plan, you're flanking left now, and that completely switches changes his specific form of intention, his specific intentions, and they're
Right.
dependent upon each other. So I think that's am I correct in saying that would be the cornerstone or the cat or the
Of Searle, it sounds like you're sympathetic to
Critical
Searle's view of the irreducible cooperative version of collective intentionality.
Maybe have time for one more question, and then we'll take a break.
Dr. Towson?
I'm nitpicky, but what is my job after all? On one of your slides, or one of the last ones, you were talking about collective recognition, and you said something about it requires mutual support, collective recognition.
Mutual agreement, perhaps?
Maybe one more slide back, I think, perhaps. Maybe not. But you said something about, I wrote it down here, that collective recognition has conditions of mutual support. And I'm not sure what mutual support would mean if you're talking about recognition.
Well, I'm not sure exactly which slide you're referring to. Maybe it was this one. But I can think of ways in which mutual support exists. Well, for instance, if we collectively recognize that there's a law, the law plays a function and plays a role in our lives. And if you don't follow that law, and if it's serious enough, the police will come and arrest you. And in that sense, maybe there is some mutual support there.
I see.
So, because it would be supportive of the rest of the population.
All right.
Any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you very much.